the anti-herbs. No, these are not the herbs that are against other herbs, but nor are we as herbalists anti-herbs. No, I'm talking about the herbs that have anti in front of their properties. And here specifically, I'm referring to what I like to think of as subtypes of antimicrobial. These would be things like antibacterial, antifungal, antiseptic, antiviral, antiparasitic, anti-amoeba, anti-malarial, anti, right? And, it's funny, for a long time, I've been really kind of against this way of thinking about herbs because I think it bears a slight risk. And that is that the risk of potentially leading down a pathway of a very allopathic way of thinking about herbs. When we think about an herb as being antibacterial, you start treating it like a, quote, herbal antibiotic. Or when you see the word antiviral next to an herb, it's very common for people to think that that herb is going to kill any type of virus that you might come into contact with, right? Whether that's a herpes simplex virus, whether that's human papillomavirus, whether that's COVID, whether that's the flu, the common cold, et cetera, et cetera. And this can lead to some mistakes in how we apply herbs for pathogens, right? For infectious states. Now, when we look at the anti-herbs, for a very long time, like I said, I have not really been too keen on this way of thinking, but as Paul Bergner humorously states, he's had multiple experiences in his plant path where his, what did he call it? His karma runs over his dogma, which I thought was a funny way of saying it, meaning that you kind of have to reassess and rethink your approach to things. And I would say I've had some similar experiences for this in regards to the anti-type herbal actions, and specifically here when we're thinking about those categories of herbs which are traditionally used for treating infectious states. And what we see when we look at these types of actions is that there's oftentimes considerable overlap between these types of actions. And oftentimes we can think of that in terms of degrees of strength. So, for example, many herbs that tend to be anti-amoebic or anti-parasitic typically are also antibacterial and antifungal. Most antifungal herbs are also antibacterial. Yet many antibacterial herbs are neither antifungal or antiparasitic. So we kind of, as I've studied this materia medica in more depth over the months, of which there's lots of herbs that you'll notice have these properties in front of them, I noticed some themes, I noticed some patterns, and oftentimes it is a matter of strength. So, you have kind of your basic antibacterial herbs, and then you have your antifungals that are also antibacterial, and then you have your antiparasitics that tend to also be antifungal and antibacterial. And then, quote, antiviral tends to be kind of interwoven throughout all of those. Now, the main issue that I have with these, as I said, it leads to an allopathic way of thinking. It also leads to a thinking that the herb kills the bacteria, the virus, the fungus. But do they? Do these herbs actually kill viruses or bacteria or fungi? Well, I think there's some instances where the herbs do. I think there's some instances where they actually don't. What I would say is very common is that many of these herbs do what we might think of as stimulating host resistance. Meaning that, if we think of, what is the most powerful antimicrobial, antiparasitic, antiviral herb or substance, well, I would say it's not any of those. It's your own body, right? Like your own immune system is the most potent and powerful antiviral and antibacterial thing that you got. And a lot of the times the herbs are actually functioning to support the vital intelligence of the body that goes towards fighting off these types of pathogens. So for example, many herbs that we see in these types of categories are diaphoretic, meaning that they will support the body's natural response to fever. They will support the fever, help the fever move more quickly. Many times they are expectorant, meaning they will help clear the respiratory tract of phlegm and mucus and aid in a more productive cough. Many times they are alterative and will help to open up the channels of elimination, clear metabolic waste products, aid in lymphatic drainage, being a lymphagogue property. Many times herbs in this category are clearing of blood heat or damp heat type conditions, which many infectious states tend to produce. In that way, many of them tend to be inflammation modulating to an extent. So there's a whole spectrum of ways in which these herbs are supporting your body's vital intelligence, your body's natural mechanisms for fighting off infection. Not to mention, of course, all of these actions coupled with immune stimulation, right? By stimulating macrophages and natural killer cells and B cells and T cells and all of that. So there's a way of thinking kind of oftentimes they're seen as polar ways of seeing infectious states where, it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing, right? Is it, do we get sick because a pathogen enters our body and makes us sick? Or is it more due to the ecosystem or the tissue state that the body becomes hospitable to these pathogens, and there is therefore an environment created where they are able to thrive and flourish and therefore get us sick? Which one comes first? Well, again, chicken or the egg thing. And oftentimes people tend to think of, rather than just thinking allopathically of kill the virus, kill the bacteria, it's rather, change the ecological state of the tissues to make them less hospitable to these types of infectious states. Oftentimes this comes down to clearing damp heat, but not always. Of course, there are dry respiratory tract infections and things like that. But that tends to represent, in a way, two fundamental different approaches, one being allopathic, kill the pathogen, the other being, hey, don't focus so much on killing the pathogen, rather focus on altering the state of the tissues or the environment to make it less hospitable to those pathogens.